Hey everyone, so today we're going to be going over blueprints. Blueprints were just released in the 2020.12 release of Home Assistant, and they're here to help us create easy automations. So, what we're going to get into is how to import a blueprint from the community forums, how to create an automation from that imported blueprint, and then at the end, we'll go into a little bit more advanced to show how to actually create a simple blueprint. So stick along and we'll go into each one. I'll make you come to my cloud, 'cause I am not coming down. All right, everyone. Let's go into a little bit about what blueprints actually are and why we needed them. Blueprints are just a way to create automations in your home quickly and easily. So what this means is they give you the ability to download a template and then import that into your Home Assistant instance and use that template to easily give that template your entity, your device, your lights, your values that you want to use and create that automation. Now, this is not connected to the cloud. This is not connected to anything outsourced. When you're importing it, you're making a local copy of that blueprint. And what that means is it's not connected to that Home Assistant community. If, for example, Home Assistant community goes down, your blueprint is still intact. So you can still use that. So this means you no longer have to go through that full automation creation process. You just load down the template and insert your required data that template requires. And it's super simple. And let's get into it. First, we're starting on the Home Assistant Lovelace dashboard screen, but let's go to the Home Assistant community real quick. So what you're looking at here is the forums for the Home Assistant community, and I'll leave a link down in the description below for this. But if you go here, you can click on all categories, change that to Blueprint Exchange, and you'll see here a lot of people have already started inserting their blueprints for everyone to use. So for example, someone created a send notification for battery level. So what you can do is you can click on that one, import it into your Home Assistant instance, and use that inside your automations. So for example, let's go ahead and click on one that I personally added. You'll see that I gave a little description on what it is and then gave the code, the YAML code to this blueprint. You don't have to worry about the YAML code. All we're going to do is say, okay, we like this description. We like what it says it's going to do. So we're going to copy this URL. Literally go to the URL, click Control C or click copy, and we're going to go back to our Home Assistant instance. So here, we're going to go to configuration, and you'll see there's a new little section here above automations that says blueprints. We're going to click on blueprints, and now you'll see all the blueprints that you've ever imported. We're now going to go to import blueprint. Here it says you can import blueprints from GitHub and the community forums and enter the URL to just enter the URL to the blueprint below. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take that URL that I just copied. We're going to paste it. So here you'll see that full URL is in this text box. We're going to hit preview blueprint. And what that does is Home Assistant went to the community forum, pulled back the code, and inserted it into your page. So now if you want, you can look at what the blueprint is. We're not going to go into that. You'll see that it created a blueprint path. This is where it's going to store it at. And we can click import blueprint. It also gives me a little description here as well. So let's hit import blueprint. Awesome. So now you'll see here that set thermostat temperature to specific time. This is from that same import that we created. And that's as simple as that. So what we just did is we went to the Home Assistant community forum, found a blueprint that we would like to import, copied the URL, went into Home Assistant into the blueprint section, clicked import blueprint, pasted the URL to the community forum, and clicked import. It's as simple as that. All you need to do is those few steps, and you've got a blueprint within your Home Assistant instance. Okay, now, what do you do with them? What are they for? Did it automatically set up your automation? is it already working? No. So there is a little bit of, work we need to do to create the automation from that blueprint, but it's super, super simple. Let's go into how we can do that. So you'll see here that we imported set thermostat temperature at a specific time. And it's the one that we created. And it says from the Home Assistant URL. We're going to go ahead and click Create Automation on the right-hand side. Once we click that, it's going to bring us up to a new automation creation screen. The new way to create an automation using that blueprint right in Home Assistant. So you'll see here, let's go through it. It says set temperature of the thermostat at a specific time. We can place in a description, and it tells us which blueprint that we're trying to use. So it's the one that says set thermostat temperature at a specific time, the one we imported. Gives me that description that I had on there. And now all we need to do is set in these few different variables that I set up in this blueprint. For example, the blueprint is setting a thermostat temperature at a specific time. So therefore, I need a time, the thermostat to change, and the temperature you want me to change it to. What I'll do is I'll click 7 a.m. At 7 a.m., I want you to change my Ecobee, which is my upstairs, to, let's say, 74 degrees, right? So every day at 7 a.m., I want my Ecobee thermostat to be set to 74 degrees. As simple as that. All I have to do now is click Save. We can go to our automation screen and see that set the thermostat at a temperature at a specific time is now one of our new automations. Every day that it hits 7 a.m., you'll be able to see that the Ecobee will change to 74 degrees. As simple as that. Super simple to create really easy automations. And it can be super simple to create really complex automations. But let's go into a little bit more advanced. So if you want to create blueprints, you can continue watching. If you want to go ahead and get a refresher, or you're interested in creating your own blueprints, then we can go from there. So what we're going to do is we're going to take an automation, and it's going to be that same automation that we just created, but we're going to look at it in an automation standpoint and create a blueprint based on this automation. This automation here is to set the thermostat to 72 degrees at 7 p.m. You'll see that we have one trigger, and it's at a time, a fixed time. We have one action, a call service action to the climate.setTemperature service, and the entity to the change, and the temperature as the service data. Super simple automation that we're going to convert. How do we do that? First, we need to create a file in the blueprints folder. So in your configuration folder, your Home Assistant configuration folder, there'll be a new directory called blueprints. In there, there'll be a folder called automation. And within that, you can create different folders for your different blueprints. In this example, I've created a new file, a new .yaml file, in my Home Assistant directory of the automation blueprints directory. So you can kind of see that directory here, or the hierarchy here. You can see blueprints under the configuration folder, automation under that, and this is already created, and then your folders for your blueprints within there. Let's go ahead and get started. So to start creating a blueprint, we're first going to tell it that it's a blueprint. So blueprint here, and hit colon. We're now going to hit tab. So tab over once, we're going to name our blueprint. I'm going to say set thermostat to 72 degrees at 7 p.m. Right? So that's just coming straight from the automation. But that's a little bit too specific. So let's go back to our automation really quickly. You'll see here that it's set thermostat to 72 degrees at 7 p.m. For a blueprint, it's a little bit more of a template than a specific automation. We don't want to create a blueprint just for this one instance of this automation. We want to create a blueprint so that you can store different data points so that that automation can be created multiple times for maybe a different time of the day, maybe a different degree maybe a different thermostat. So that's where we're going to go into, is how to make it a template style blueprint. To do that, let's rename this a little bit to say set thermostat to a specific temperature at a certain time of day. That's a little bit more of a description for a template than a certain automation. So next, we're going to give a mandatory field for a blueprint automation, which is telling it the domain is automation. So now we're going to jump to creating the blueprint triggers, conditions, actions, etc. And we'll come back to this section of the blueprint later. Let's create a trigger. So the trigger for our simple set thermostat was a time trigger. And it's a fixed time at 7 o'clock, which is 12 plus 7 is 19. We're going to go back into our code. We're going to make a new field or a new config here for trigger. Trigger colon, and then tab after it. Next, we're going to put the platform as time. So the platform is going to be the same as your trigger type. And these are set up, and you can see these in the Home Assistant documentation for all the platforms, and I'll link that in the description below. But we've created a trigger for it, and the platform as time. Now, for time, you'll see this in the documentation, is you need an at for the time trigger. You need what time to trigger at, right? And so for this section, this is where we go into the templates and to the inputs that a user can do for this blueprint. We're going to click input, and we're going to name a variable that we want to choose. So I'm going to put time to set. I'm just going to put it underscores in between it, because it does need to be one full string to make that variable. So now we've created our trigger. The next thing we need to do is create our action. Our action here is a call service action to the climate.setTemperature service, and then these are going to be our inputs: the climate, the thermostat entity, and the temperature. To do that, we're going to add a new config for action. Click tab. The service for this action is climate.set_temperature. The service needs an entity ID. And here's where we're going to create a new input variable for climate_entity. And then the service needs a data. And the data we're going to give it is the temperature config variable. And that's going to be its own input as well. We're going to call that temp to set. So far we've created the blueprint name, told it was for an automation, created the trigger, told it was a time trigger, and created a variable to set the time for. We've then added an action, created the service for climate.setTemperature, and then created variables for the entity and for the temperature to set it at. So the last thing we're going to do, and this is something that can be changed by the user later, but we're just going to set it up to be a mode single. So now that we've created everything here, we are almost done. But we do need to set up what these variables that we created are. So each one of these inputs. To do that, we're going to go back up to the blueprint section. And here is where we create some input config. So we say input, tab over, and inside here, we're doing time_to_set, which is our first variable that we created. And we're going to tell it what that variable should be. So the name of this, which is going to come up and show here. So for on the left-hand side of your blueprint, we're going to call it time. The next, what we need to tell it is what type of selector is it. So selector tab time colon. So now what we've done is said, create some inputs. Here's the input name. What selector should it be? And selector means what is the type of input this is on the right is going to be. And we just told it it's going to be a time. So Home Assistant's going to say, okay, that's a time. Let's give it a time input. That means we're going to say, there's an hour, there's a minute and a second, and then there's AM and PM. So that's automatically done for you, what you said at the time. The next part is the action inputs. So the first one being climate entity. We're going to call this name. We're going to call this thermostat, because this is going to be the thermostat they're going to be using. The selector will be entity, because it's going to be an entity selector. And then inside that, we can actually specify what domain the entity dropdown should contain. So for this, we're going to say domain. We're going to say climate, because we only want climate domain entities to be within this dropdown. You can't set the temperature of your lawnmower, for example. And the last variable input that we can add is the temp to set. This is going to be named temperature, selector of number. And number has a min, we're going to set to 0, a max, we're going to set to 100, a unit of measurement, and the unit of measurement, of course, is going to be degrees, as this can be in Fahrenheit or Celsius. And we're going to make it a mode of box. And now we're done with our blueprint. We can click save. And I'm going to add a little bit here just to say demo so we know which one we're looking at. I'm going to click save. So now if we go back to our blueprints, you'll see that set thermostat to a specific temperature at a certain time of day is in our blueprint section. To make sure, maybe yours isn't there yet because you haven't reloaded your automations, you can click, and this is with the quick bar. If Home Assistant is selected, click C, and then hit reload, and click automations. We've now reloaded all of our automations, which in turn reloads blueprints. We're going to click into set thermostat to a specific time, the one that we just created, and you'll see that this is what we just created. Just created a blueprint so that you can set the time, thermostat, and temperature. So that's how you create a blueprint. It's really easy, super simple. So if you are into automations and you are into creating different automations all the time, create blueprints for everyone out there that can use those automations. And, even if it's a new idea to them, they may not even have heard of that. It's a really cool way to give back to the community. Go out there, create some automations via some blueprints, make it templatized, makes it easier on you even if you want to reuse that automation. And the selectors are super easy. Makes automation creation super, super easy. That wraps this up. Make sure to like the video if you enjoyed this. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more of the content, and check out my other videos that you should see floating around the screen. Thank you guys, and I will talk to you later.